Hello, my name is Pip Bradford, and I'm the production manager for the 2021 Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and I am delighted to welcome you to this panel, Science and Comics with Cells at Work. It is also my privilege to take this moment to honor and acknowledge the original caretakers of this land, the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is a territory that was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, the Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to share and care for the land. We also acknowledge that this area is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. TCAF makes this acknowledgement as a reminder that we are all treaty people and that we have a responsibility to the land and to each other. Through our programming for the festival itself and our other activities year-round, TCAF is committed to strengthening its relationship with Indigenous communities across Canada through centering Indigenous voices and perspectives in comic arts. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to hand the mic off to Mimi, our moderator for this afternoon's programming.
All right, thanks very much, Pip, and welcome everyone. This is the Science, Comics, and Cells at Work panel. We'll be discussing the manga series, Cells at Work, at large, and today we are joined by three very special panelists. I'd like to introduce you to science teacher Wen Zhao, Dr.
Hi.
Ariel Liu, and manga writer Deborah Aoki. If the three of you would like to introduce yourselves a little bit, starting with Wen, let's do that.
Hello, everybody. I am Wen. So let's see, man. I did my microbiology degree in undergraduate at McGill University, where I met some lovely people. And I served as a VP of the McGill Anime Club for a couple of years there. And that's where I really, I guess, my weebness bloomed a little bit, so to say. After that, I did my educational degree here in my hometown of Calgary. And I've been teaching here for about 4 years, I think. Maybe I'm missing a year there due to COVID. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I look forward to discussing, and I'm a huge fan of the series itself. There's a lot, I really like the fact that it's able to bring in a lot of accurate biology and be a really good introduction through science for weebs like myself, I guess. All right.
Next up, Ariel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ariel, and I have a medical degree. And since then, I pursued anatomical pathology as subspecialty. And what I do for work is I look at cells under the microscope and diagnose diseases. On the side, I write a young adult science fantasy comic. So sort of have a perspective on both sides of the coin here. Nice to meet you all.
Wonderful. All right, and Deb.
Hi, I'm Deb Aoki. I write about manga for publications like Publishers Weekly. And I'm also a co-host on a new podcast called Manga-splaining with Chris Butcher, Chip Zdarsky, and David Brothers, where we try to introduce manga to people who don't read a lot of manga. And in our case, that person is Chip. So you can check that out at mangasplaining.com. We have a new episode every Tuesday.
Amazing. All right. And my name is Mimi Shen, and I will be acting as your moderator today. I also have a background in science and education, and I'm a huge fan of the series, so I'm super excited to talk to all of you. All right. So just to start, I would like each of you to tell me what your favorite scene or character from the Cells at Work series is, and how you feel about the way this scene or character was represented through Shimizu Sensei's eyes. So I'd like to start again with Wen, if you're ready.
Okay. So for me, I studied microbiology and immunology at university. And one of the things that came up that was kind of different from what I thought the immune system does is the existence of a regulatory T cell. So she's probably one of my favorite characters in the series. Number one, I love her design, the One-san kind of type. And the fact that when I was in university, to show my age a little bit, T-reg cells were they're not super new, but they're fairly new. And we didn't know a lot about them. So I was kind of super excited for me, like, oh my God, there's an anime with like this sort of new scientific discovery in it. And I think in particular was in chapter 25. So I think volume 5. I love, like, on page 200, you see her do like the weird dodge to the side as she was dodging attacks. But I think he had a pretty good representation of what a Treg cell does. When we think about immune system, often we think, oh, it's attacking something, that's what it does. But there's always going to be a balance of some sort, and regulatory T cells are sort of that balance. And I found it really interesting that they chose to show that aspect when usually we don't think of that as part of the immune system at all. So I love that part. That's great.
Mm, that's a really good perspective. Thank you. I actually also really like the regulatory T cell. I think her secretarial design is
Yep.
a really good representation of what she does in the body. All right. Next up, Ariel.
Awesome, thanks. As someone who studied this for their career, I think overall there were a lot of concepts that I enjoyed sort of reviewing. A lot of the specific facts that are, I think, a good reminder to me that I take for granted. And so a lot of it being shared in public like this and to pique people's interest, I was actually really pleased with how the whole story unfolded, as well as the little fact boxes that were present to help introduce the different types of characters and the different roles of these cells and what they do in our body. One of the aspects that I particularly enjoyed is, since I've done some research into T cells, I was very pleased to see the development of T cells and how they look at antigens, and being able to, throughout their training within the thymus, to look at what specific antigens they should be aiming for. And so through the selection process, not be able to recognize, to be able to help recognize what's foreign and what's our own body, because when this sort of process becomes dysregulated, that's when autoimmune diseases happen. And so the fact that they introduced this concept in a very fun and entertaining way, I was really entertained myself while reading this. Overall, I think the whole manga itself, especially with the aspects of putting sort of real life metaphors to what these immune cells did as their function, I thought that was very clever and very creative as well. I'd say my favorite, which I guess is a little bit maybe unconventional, is like, my favorite is actually the person who's a cell, and then he, in the manga, initially hides a microbe, and later on, like, goes to the stomach and things like that, and help the reader appreciate how diverse our microbe environment is in our body. I thought that was also very clever and creative, and the designs of these microbes, the good ones, the bad ones are also very creative and very special too, but the ones that are very beneficial for our body, and the way that that they're portrayed is so adorable, and I really enjoyed reading about that. So the fact that our cells recognize that these are helpful microbes really helped me sort of bond with this particular character that I don't think they have a name, but I will just say that the cell is one of my favorite characters in the story.
Awesome. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of love for T cells today. And I also really loved the exploration of the body's microbe in volume 5, as you mentioned, Ariel. And yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that cell has a name. He's just called Mr. Cell.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a really good representation for the reader. Yeah.
The microbe advocate, yeah.
Awesome. All right, how about you, Deb?
Just really enjoy how inventive all the different bacteria is and viruses are drawn, and they all kind of have different personalities. I like in like the first chapter when I think the bacteria gets caught in the act all the time, and it's kind of like this Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny moment, like whoop. It's kind of like this. It's something scary, but he's kind of goofy too. And then like there's like pollen and all kinds of the ways that they try to make what would just normally look like just like a blob on a scientific slide have a personality and have distinct qualities. I think is really inventive. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Of course, not only the cells, but the bacteria and viruses all have very distinct character designs, and yeah, that's something really worth mentioning as well. So hopefully all of our listeners tuning in already know what Cells at Work is, and we've been geeking out about that for the past 5-10 minutes. But in case any new readers are joining us, I do just want to provide a quick summary. Cells at Work shows the various cells that work in the human body, mostly immune cells, but the protagonist features a red blood cell and a white blood cell. And they show them going about their daily lives, delivering oxygen, protecting the body from harmful foreign substances, and dealing with all sorts of the ruckus that we as humans may not even realize is happening inside our own body. So for my next question, I'd like to ask the three of you, just from your perspective, and I know this is a really vague question, but how accurate do you feel Cells at Work is? Is there anything you feel that the series does particularly well in conveying certain scientific concepts? And would you like to comment on that? So for that, I'd like to start with Ariel, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. So because I do have perspectives as both a medical doctor as well as a comic artist as well, a lot of the core concepts of within those little boxes that introduce what the cells are and what they do are our basic facts that we learned about our human body, what in general, what, for example, a red blood cell does, what a neutrophil does, for example, eosinophils, which we, commonly see during parasitic infections and things like that. So I think the overall concepts are very well portrayed within the comic itself. But at the same time, I understand that there are also a lot of facts that must be sort of changed in terms of bring forth a entertaining narrative. And so, for instance, what we, one of my other favorite characters is all the little platelets, and they're super adorable. And it kind of makes sense that cell-wise they are smaller than a red blood cell, for example, when we see them on blood smears. But the reality, unfortunately, is that these cells do have a lifespan that would not be able to carry the narrative quite so far if this was portrayed completely scientifically accurate. For example, platelets typically lyse or become not functional anymore after 7 days. And that's one of the reasons why when we ask people to or ask help for blood transfusions, that's actually one of the limiting factors that a lot of the times when we do transfuse blood that do include platelet products, their shelf life is 7 days, and a red blood cell is 120 days, for example. And then the fact that neutrophils, when they go out and fight bacteria, when they extravasate from the bloodstream, they do die during that particular sort of fight with the microbe itself, and typically go on more or less what we can consider just like releasing their cell contents, and some of them do even release their own sort of DNA and so forth to help create that microenvironment filled with inflammation to help fight the bacteria. And so they do die during their fight with the bacteria, but that kind of story would not be so as powerful as the one that we have here, which is following the lives of the red blood cell and the white blood cells through even from with a little backstory about how they develop and then how they come to be within the body themselves. So a lot of these things are more of a creative or artistic direction that would not be scientifically accurate, but at the same time, I think the balance of presenting the facts and presenting the way that readers can pique their interest in how the human body works, I think it's a very valid way to bring about the story and to help increase health literacy in that sense.
Okay, so it sounds like the basic concepts are pretty accurate, but there's been some creative licenses taken, obviously, to make it a more readable and a more enjoyable story.
Exactly. And I think that is the aim of this. It has done so very well. People are more likely to read up on recurring characters than say flip open the textbook and so forth. But a lot of the diagrams, I personally also recognize. For example, when they show the life table, which I can pull up right here on the differentiation of blood cells, which I confess, the first time I looked at it when I was just scrolling through, I had a little mini sort of higher blood pressure because that is something I have to memorize. Even all the steps in between the cells, as you know, the prometacytes and all the granulocytes and how they differentiate and you know, in a way grow up to be their mature self. It's all these things we have to memorize for our career, but in this case, it's presented in a way that is more palatable and a lot cuter. And in fact, I feel like if I had seen this a lot earlier, it may have made my you know, learning all the more specific steps a lot easier and fun.
That actually is, I think, a great way to maybe throw this topic over to Wen, since you teach science. What do you think about the accuracy level of cells at work, and is it usable, for example, in a classroom? Like if Ariel had been born 10 years later, could she maybe have encountered this in her high school
Well,
science
she would have been an
class?
amazing student to teach, I'm sure. But I will say first, yeah, I do get a little bit of PTSD sometimes from this, just because some of the stuff I learned are stuff I had to memorize a lot, where I spend you know, late nights studying this stuff to take a test on. But you know, like the diagram, like some of the immune pathway stuff, I would say overall, yes, it is very good. Personally, I think some of my favorite stuff is things they don't explain exactly. Like the nice little boxes, they're really nice. But I think I really like the fact that they include a lot of details that you might not notice right away. So things like, let's see. So chapter 17, page 69, there's it shows the red blood cell carrying 4 oxygens, like 4 oxygen canisters in her little package. So I think it's one of the only times where they show inside the package of oxygen. And it's 4 because every hemoglobin has 4, can carry 4 oxygens. So small details like that. Or in chapter 1, I think in page like 27, when the platelets are fixing the road, they have boxes that are labeled CA2. So I actually had to go and Google this because I forgot exactly why that is. So I looked up the role of calcium in blood clotting, and it turns out calcium is required to activate platelets. So they're having trouble reaching the boxes of CA, so they can't get activated and do their work. So, or like the white blood cell, the neutrophil, he has a very prominent receptor on the back of his head that always pops up. You kind of just like, huh, that's weird. He always has that. I wonder what that is. And then if you were to study immunology later on, you'll know that they're called toll-like receptors, and they sort of recognize like ancient bacterial parts that our bodies know that, oh, whenever I see this, it's a bacteria, so I have to be on full alert. So things like that are very small details that they don't fully explain, but I think a lot of us have the experience where we sort of see something, it's in our memory, and later on when we learn about it, we go, that's why that was the way it was shown, was the way it is. And that really helps you to consolidate your knowledge. One of the things we learn in education is that a lot of knowledge we have and we build are not built on nothing. We don't just memorize facts in an empty space. We sort of try to relate them to things we already know. So what this series does really well is that if someone watches a series like this and remember these little, you know, at first really cute details, like the, oh, the platelets are all so small, they're all little kids. And then later on you learn, wait a minute, that's because they all die really fast. So they can never get old. It's kind of dark, but now I remember it forever. I'll never forget it, right? So those are the things that are really helpful for, I think, learning, is that it really helps you to have something to build your knowledge upon. It creates a little bit of a scaffold. So when you actually learn the real facts, it helps you to contextualize it and to make it more meaningful to you. Even more than that, I think one of my favorite chapters will be chapter 10 on the circulatory system. This is one funny enough, I majored in biology, but I only ever taught chemistry and physics, but and calculus even. But I was a sub for I think biology 20, so grade 11 biology in Alberta. And one of the things they were learning was how the circulation works, like, oh, which valves of the heart are there, which chamber the blood goes into first, which aorta they goes through, which vein and arteries it goes through in what order, and where is the blood flow the fastest. I think chapter 10 does a really good job as a review. because it shows things like the chambers of the heart. It shows that as you're coming out of the aorta, it's like super crowded and things are all in a big rush and they have to like go really, really fast because the blood pressure is really high. And it shows things like when you're going back to the from the veins back to the heart, that there's actually one-way valves. So she passes through like a ticket gate, I think.
Yeah.
And she can't go back.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, what's going on? I want to make sure I'm going the right way. And it has to do with the fact that the veins only allow blood flow in one direction. So things like that, I think that chapter is actually really good for review. I think I recommended all the students in that class to like go watch the episode so they can sort of review for their biology test coming up, because it has a lot of good general information for them to really dig into. But yeah, those are just some of the things I found interesting there.
Oh, okay, I mean, that's a really interesting point. So like Ariel was mentioning that the little factoid boxes provide really good, solid, basic information about immunology. But when you picked up on sort of the non-directly mentioned facts that are worked into the creative design of the characters and the story, and I think that's really fascinating. And also, I will never be able to read about the platelets again without thinking about how they're going to die in a week.
It's so tragic.
Thank you for that, and sorry to our audience for
I
anyone.
hope I didn't ruin that for you.
Traumatizing a
I'm just
little
thinking,
bit
it's
going
just the
into
fact
this
that,
week.
yeah.
Yeah, but it is true, isn't it? They
Yeah.
do have a very short lifespan, unfortunately. Sorry, we've been talking a little heavily on the science side, but Deb, do you have any comments after hearing these two talk about the sort of the accuracy and the representation of the series?
I guess it makes me wonder, like, was there a consultant who was working with the author on this to kind of make sure that all the metaphors and all the information, the relationships between the characters made sense, but not only from a story and character point of view, but from a scientific point of view? Because, like, for example, like Food Wars, for example, right? There's a cooking consultant, and in Smile Down the Runway, there's a fashion consultant. So I was wondering if there was a science or medical consultant that also worked on this series, because it seems like it according to you two, it seems like it's hitting all the right notes.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think we can answer that without talking directly to Shimizu Sensei. But yeah, definitely. From hearing from our panelists, I get the impression that it would have been very important to have some experts on the side to really solidify the metaphor that's being used in the series. Yeah,
because it's very deep and wide, like all things like making the red bone marrow is like a school or like a nursery or a factory, like some mix of that kind of thing. And then there's this part at the end of that chapter where the little baby red cell has a little thing on the top of the head, and then the macrophage like pops it off, and then that's when it's immature. Like, what?
Yeah, when red blood cells have nuclei in them, and so from more of a sort of science medical aspects about what we do look at blood smears. That is something that we look for, is whether or not in the blood how many cells are mature, how many cells are immature, and if there are any dysregulation that cause them to be inappropriately mature or inappropriately elevated levels. And all these sorts of things are things that we consider, and that's why we learn about how they mature and what normal is, and so we can identify what abnormal is. And I think as a person who also write stories, is that a lot of research can go into creating fictional works, but as a reflection of real life. And so I have no doubts that if there has been consultants or beta readers or things like that as supports to help ensure that this the overall concepts are factually correct and presented in a way that is palatable and is can still reach the audience as it seeks to do, even though taking some artistic liberties.
I mean, compared to like Tezuka's Blackjack, like Tezuka was a doctor, trained as a doctor as well. And Blackjack is a very fantastical version of medicine, whereas this seems a little more grounded in real science, I think.
Oh, just to clarify, red blood cells, when they mature, they lose their nucleus. That's why she gets her thing popped off.
Yes.
That's why she's mature, yeah. So it's a nucleus getting, I mean, that's not how it gets taken out, but it goes away. Yeah.
It's so cute Because it
It
makes
is.
it seem like it's a graduation or something. And then
Right.
this whole idea of, them being babies and then like going to children and then adults who have jobs. It's like, what?
I think
But
that exactly like you say, like that whole process is something that all of us readers from all sorts of different backgrounds recognize, that we start off as children, and then grow up, and then think about careers, think about life, think about the roles that we play in life, and I think that really hits it on the right notes.
it makes it really memorable, right? Because it's something all of a sudden something you can relate to more than
Exactly.
looking at like different sizes of blobs.
Right.
I personally like the blobs. I like looking at the blobs, but
I don't know. Parasitology lab kind of ruined blobs for me. But on the subject of metaphor, one of the things I found really interesting as well is that like how many times do you see in a medical show where they show viruses that's like just monsters attacking the body? One thing I really liked about this is actually that they show viruses like making our own cell into zombies, which is a much more
Yes.
accurate way of depicting what viruses actually do. The
Mm.
virus itself is like a little blob and doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't even seem alive, which is perfect, honestly. And then it makes the cells into zombies for them, which is basically what viruses do. So I think that part is where it does a really good job as well. It's just that metaphor is something I haven't seen before in like a, something like, what was that Aussie and something else, that cartoon show with where they just show viruses as like monsters attacking the body. It doesn't do that. It makes a distinction between bacteria that are actually like alive and humanoid, and viruses are just like blobs that makes other cells into zombies.
Yeah, that's an important point, and I think particularly now that we're all dealing with a virus for the past year, I think that and that the spikes in it, right? Like it's like the coronavirus
Right.
thing. It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I remember that. It just made it somehow help make it click a little bit. Like I work a lot with a lot of technology and explaining a lot of using visual metaphors to explain technology concepts, and just being able to explain something like that in a way that's like, oh, it gives it that extra level of memorability, like making it memorable and more comprehensible.
I agree. And I think comics is an excellent medium for that. Not only to include those little factors in, exactly like, both Wen and Deb have mentioned, as well as the visual storytelling, the visual narrative itself, being a reflection of what we see, scientifically too. And I think those aspects are what makes comics so strong, because it's not, the readers are not just reading the words themselves and creating that sort of base in knowledge. It's also absorbing all these additional knowledge that can be gained from looking at pictures and having that sequence make sense, and help them learn and be able to appreciate that, how the jargon fits within the whole acquiring that sort of vocabulary to further build on top of that base scaffold of knowledge.
And also, I mean, I started reading Cells at Work before COVID-19 came along, but then I remember the chapter about the cytokine storm. And it's like, oh,
yes,
this all makes like, wow. Now, even before they started talking about how, COVID-19 affects bodies by, putting the immune system into overdrive, it's like, oh, yes, I remember that. Like I had that visual in my mind when people in the news would be talking about it.
I think in the past year, all of us have been more in tune with perhaps scientific news and scientific facts, just because we've all been embroiled in it. And since you just mentioned it, Deb, I would like to mention here that in this panel, we did promise the audience that there would be a sneak peek of Volume 6 of Cells at Work, which is coming out from Kodansha on June 22nd. And the English version coming out June 22nd, the final volume of Cells at Work, Volume 6, actually does contain a chapter on the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the virus responsible for COVID-19. So I believe we will have some pages on the screen for the audience to see, but Kodansha has been very kind as to provide all of us a little sneak preview of what this chapter is. And I wanted to ask you guys how you felt about sort of this representation of something that's so current, that's affecting so many people, and that's also very, very new, right? Because a lot of the information is sort of just coming out in waves, and at the beginning of the pandemic, there were so many things we weren't sure about. But how did you feel when you were reading the final chapter of Volume 6?
I'll get us started if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
then if you would
Because
like to
Deb was
start.
mentioning that about the cytokine storm. I think that's one of the things that I really liked about it is that I think on page 14 they showed the inflammatory cytokines showing up. I think it's like little notes with things to pump them up. It's like, oh man, I'm fighting for something important kind of thing. And then at the page 33 near the end, when they needed to calm down, the I think the body, so the patient, I guess, got some anti-inflammatory cytokines, which were little leaflets, and they're like childhood memories of the immune cells. So like, oh man, I'm being soothed, it's coming down. But I just really like the fact that it's showing that a lot of the damage done by COVID is actually due to, well, for some of the more severe cases are due to cytokine storms. So our immune system acting up, being overly active and really damaging our body in its attempt to fight off the virus. Of course, the virus does damage to your body as well. It's killing your cells. But I really like he's showing that part, especially because in the public sphere, we hear all these, how do I be nice about this? Alternative interpretation of medications that emphasize on oh, let's boost your immune system against the fight. I think it provides a very, so I think this counter that really one-dimensional perception of what our body does. It's not just about, oh, I'm gonna boost my immune system, it's super strong, it fights off everything. I'm gonna eat all these interesting supplements boost my immune system. Where reality is all about a balance. And then I think this manga overall does a good job of it. And it shows it here too, where your immune system can be overly active. It can damage your body, and sometimes that's actually the bigger problem instead of the virus doing damage to you. One of my friend actually has autoimmune disorder, so I think he knows firsthand that sometimes it's not always a good thing to have a quote unquote strong immune system. You know.
Yeah, I don't think the concept of something like a cytokine storm was something the general public, those of us maybe not in science every single day, was very familiar with before.
Hello,
before
art
this past
majors.
year. Hi,
I'm
art
Dr.
majors. And I think it's, it was really interesting that that was something that did get shown in this chapter. Deb, you were mentioning that you had never heard of cytokine storms until you read Cells at Work, and then it sort of showed up when the pandemic rolled out. How did you feel when you were reading this chapter? Like, did it sort of click it better for you?
It did. I mean, but it just basically re-emphasized what I kind of already knew about how that worked. I honestly, before I saw this chapter, I thought, I don't know how they're, on one hand, I thought it's too bad they don't have a Cells at Work chapter about this, because people would really need this to understand what's going on. On the other hand, I feel like I understood why there wasn't, because there was so much we didn't know about it, right? How it worked and what it does to the body, and you just don't want to just jump out there with something that isn't true, right? There's a responsibility to this type of story, because it has to be both factual and entertaining. And in this case, more factual. I mean, to have that background of being factual, because over the past year we've seen all kinds of, like Wen was saying, all kinds of I guess cockamamie theories and bizarre ideas of how this should be dealt with or cured, or what it does to the body. So I think when I've been recommending this book to people, just because I think overall, I think this, not just this book, but this whole series, and its spin-offs. Like, I think Cells at Work Cold Black is super instructive and useful. But the COVID-19 one, I thought, it's like, oh yeah, this is nice. I'm glad they did this.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're at a very unique time right now where the story sort of catches up to current events. And like you said, Deb, that when something happens in real life, and when, especially in such a high stakes, when something is impacting so many people's lives, we tend to hear more about it. And there is a bit more sort of emotions attached to it as well. Throughout the whole series, we've learned how our immune cells, what they do, learn some of the vocabulary in terms of, specific ways that our immune cells fight against foreign antigens, viruses, bacteria, sometimes even our own cells, for example. And I think the buildup to this was a very a good way to help readers be more cognizant that this is something that not just happens in textbooks, happens that because you're just the facts that we eventually learn and things like that, is that it is an ongoing process, learning about the way the world works, about new viruses, new bacteria, new antigens, and so forth. Like us, like the immune cells, we're always learning, and we're all trying to be able to gain more understanding. And through this work, although fictional, but like you said, Deb, that there's a lot of almost social or social responsibility in order to provide that good health literacy, in order for readers of a non-science background to be able to appreciate how complex our human body is, how complex things are in medicine, that we try to find and get knowledge and facts that are supported by evidence. And I think this chapter will help, once the readers get a copy of it, will be to appreciate the things that we have learned from COVID. It has been a year and a bit. And a lot of new evidence and new knowledge is coming out and so forth, and to integrate that to help us make good decisions about our own body as health professionals, how to help other people's through that knowledge, I think is very important. And I think the way the manga series went for that was very, very helpful for that.
Yeah, so all of you at some point have sort of mentioned that, in the last year, there have been a lot of unfounded theories or unfounded factoids, not really factoids then, are they? Floating
Bleach
about.
anyone?
Yes, please don't drink bleach. And I just wanted to ask from each of your perspectives, why do you think it's so easy for people to believe in, I don't know what a nice way to put it is, but let's say fake science or alternative science? Why is it so easy for people to grasp onto that and then hold on to it so tightly? So anyone want to tackle that?
I think it's a
Well,
very complex thing.
Yeah,
I
agree.
It is. I think the way humans remember knowledge is through stories, is through what has happened to us personally, is what happens to people around us. It's influenced by our own cultures and our own lived experiences in terms of interpreting what has happened sort of around us, and trying to form our own interpretations and coherent narratives to try and explain that. Mm-hmm. And it really depends on also the baseline health literacy that people have to understand how our cells work, how our body responds to different things, including medications, to other people, to diseases in general, foreign antigens and microbes and things like that. And so integrating all of that is very difficult. And I think as part of the medical professional sort of aspect to things, it is something that we that's why we talk to patients, right? That's why medicine is not just like filling in boxes and then input and output and things like that. It's for us professionals to try and establish a relationship with the patient in order to further understand where they're coming from. And so part of our education, my medical education, to be a good professional, is to be able to help bridge that understanding. And sometimes because of these different multitude of lenses are where we come from, our educational backgrounds and the way that we learn, other people learn different things are all also varied. And so I think in a way that helps explain why certain concepts might seem a little bit more attractive to hang on to, especially if they're a little bit more oversimplified. And compared to something that inherently within certain perceptions of what medical science can offer and things like that can influence and bias, and there's a lot of factors in play that can complicate things. And so I think for us as medical professionals, and I can only speak for myself because again, I'm coming from a specific medical background and things like that, it's for us to, for me, when I see something where a patient believes in something different, I try to be more explorative on why that is, and hopefully bridge that understanding to be able to offer sort of both options and help the patient make their own informed decision about things. But it's difficult, and it's very, very diverse in terms of people's opinions on things.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that, at the risk of sounding a little bit boomer, we are bombarded with a lot of information these days, whether it's through social media or through the fact that YouTube uses an algorithm to suggest to you what you've seen before, what conforms to your view to you. That's not super helpful in the sense that if you get down the wrong pipeline, all of a sudden you're being bombarded with videos of misinformation over and over, instead of getting the opposite view of how things might be different. Like I think some of us have some of us are lucky in that we have the background knowledge and when we're younger, to be able to sort through all the information a little bit, or we have individuals in our life that we can trust and talk to about something we saw on TV. I mean, I've heard some crazy things being asked about YouTube videos in class, ancient aliens, conspiracy theories, all that stuff. Every once in a while, sometimes they're jokes, sometimes they're not. And then like even last March, so right before the shutdown, I think it was before spring break. I don't know why, but I'm lucky enough that a lot of students seem to trust me, even a student I sub for. One of the girls showed up, I think at the end of the day, she's like, my family's going to go on a trip in April to Las Vegas. Are we going to have to cancel it? I was like, I will watch the news and be very careful, but,
Wait,
I don't know if that's what happened.
How old are your students?
So this was when I was in the grade 6 classroom, actually.
Oh, wow.
So a girl came up to me and she's like, yeah, our family planned a trip to go to Las Vegas in a few weeks. I was like, oh, is the COVID stuff going to be bad? Are we going to have to cancel our trip? It's like, just make sure you watch the news. I wouldn't hold my breath. It's kind of depends on how it develops. And of course, now we know what happened. I'm sure she didn't go on her trip, unfortunately. So there are things like that. So for the younger audience here, I would say that I hope you can find someone you trust to give you proper knowledge and to help you sort through all the information you get, and just to be inquisitive, and then really ask those trusted individuals in your life. Hopefully they are well informed. Whenever you have come across a piece of information that either seems too simple, it might seem a little bit, either it conforms too well with your personal views or does not go with your personal view at all. Just be inquisitive, and hopefully you have someone in your life to help you with that. But yeah, and I think this comic in particular does help a little bit with that, because I can see this comic personally when I was reading this. A lot of times I'm like, wait, that's kind of weird. Let me look this up. Like, even for me, it really made me want to go back and just double check with my knowledge and to confirm that, does this make sense? Why is this shown the way it is? Like the calcium thing, where like I wasn't sure, wait, why are they showing calcium for platelets? I don't remember that. So I have to actually go Google it and to make sure. But yeah, so just that's basically all it is. It's hopefully for the younger audiences, they have someone they can rely on a little bit for this. Hopefully they have good teachers in their life.
This is a different type of artistic license than, say, like Sengoku Basara, which is like making the Japanese generals of the past really hot guys. Like that's yeah, there's some history there, but we can be a little loosey-goosey about it for the fact that the real guys that weren't really that hot. But in this case, it's like if you plant the wrong information in someone's mind from the manga, that can have some real consequences.
Yeah, it definitely can. I think I've been asked about like global warming, stuff like that in classes before. Moon landing being fake, things like that. So obviously, like kids can get a bad impression from something they see online. And sometimes they're jokes, but I can't be sure always. So I have to make sure I tackle it from a perspective, from a way that I can't be too mean about it, but sometimes I am. I think so.
I think they just, as sixth graders, they just want to see you lose
Well,
your cool a little.
sometimes they're high school students. No. Some like the grade 6 students, like the COVID thing, that's a one-time thing. But like in grade 10, while I was teaching science 10 in high school, I got that sometimes. So it's a thing.
It's a
I
thing.
think right,
Yeah.
right now we're in an era where information is so easily acquired, but at the same time you can be so easily misinformed. And I think like what Deb and Wen have mentioned as well is to have someone to be able to bounce your ideas to be, open-minded and to read analytically, right? And to piece out information that you can say, oh, I did learn this from past, but let me just double check to see, what have others said about this as well. And overall, part of our decision making is to be able to acquire as much information that can help you to be able to make the right decision for yourself. But having people to talk to, checking your sources, checking your references are all good tools to be able to help you make that decision that you won't be able to regret and so forth.
I think one of the things I want to emphasize as well is the fact that a lot of people want answers to everything. And one of the key tenets of science is that if you're not sure about something, you don't know it. And it's okay to admit that. And then so for people who really want answers and they feel uncomfortable with the idea of not knowing why something is and where something comes from, what is the meaning of life, stuff like that, it's really easy to grasp onto answers that gives you the reassurance that they're giving you an answer that you can believe in. I just want to, again, to the younger audience, to the broader audience in general, it's just to be open to the idea of uncertainty. And sometimes when something sounds too good to be true, they're promising to giving you all the answers you possibly want about all the problems in your life. That's probably too good to be true. And hopefully you approach it with skeptical mind and to seek out appropriate sources of information. Peer-reviewed journals are nice, but I understand that's not really, it's not easily to
they're
read.
hard to read, I'll say that.
Yeah, so I understand that part.
A lot easier to read.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe one of the reasons why sometimes people don't get to the right fact at the end, the right scientific information at the end, is that it does feel a little inaccessible at times. The dense textbooks, the long jargons, the peer-reviewed journals that are behind paywalls, for example. So I think it's something that's much more entertaining and easily accessible, and from our talk today sounds like has a really good solid foundation of the basics, like cells at work. And that isn't just words, but is also visually appealing. It's something that could be really, really good for helping to maybe steer people in the right direction, especially since it does it through a story, a narrative, which, Ariel, you mentioned earlier, that's how we learn. It's what we grasp onto and how we make sense of the world, right? Yeah, but I also really liked, Wen, that you admitted that when you didn't know what the boxes labeled CA meant, that you went and actually looked it up and you sort of fact-checked the manga that you were reading to make sure you understood the design component of it. I think that's a really important part of reading analytically.
Yeah, and I would like to see, more of an intersection between science and arts. That way, that yes, we do have a bit of a learning curve to be able to understand, how everything works. Is we start with a bit of a scaffold on basic knowledge, basic facts, and then how we can increase our understanding of the world is to build on top of that. And so if you start way up here at scientific journals and things like that, you can easily become overwhelmed. And so I think with comics, educational comics, or like fiction with an element of scientific accuracy can help bridge, give information, give that sort of vocabulary in order to further understand a lot of the other resources that you may have. And so I see that as more of a collaboration of effort, and that science and arts can definitely work together to be able to help readers be able to access that information a lot better.
Yeah. And I think the onus is on us as educators and science people. Like there's to some degree, like I have to admit it, scientific research can be a little bit ivory tower-ish, that sometimes you can, even if it's not our intention, it can seem like we're looking down on people who don't know everything that we know. It's like, oh man, I know all this stuff. You're just looking at Google and stuff. And that can be a bit of a detriment. And I think we can learn something from mangas like this, how we can actually present information in a more digestible way as scientists.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there has sort of been a traditional tendency for the arts and the sciences to be at ends with each other a little bit. And I think a lot of students are under the impression that they have to pick one or the other. And if you're going to go into sciences, you're going to be strictly logical and cold and analytical and look at things in black and white. But if you're going to go into the arts, you're going to be all sort of floofy and like get to fling paint around. And sometimes the artists look down on the scientists as being like too cold and calculating. And then the scientists are looking down on the arts are like, oh, they don't understand. Like, they're just doing
Running
whatever.
on emotions.
And
right?
that's a really sort of toxic view to present, isn't it? That the idea sort of that you have to be in one world or the other, that you can't marry the two somehow and make it work for you. Would you guys like to maybe comment about the intersection between science and art, or how you would like to see manga and comics be more accepted, perhaps in the science world going forward? And I think maybe we'll end on that note.
Sure. If you don't mind, sorry, if I'm speaking too much, it's time to shut up. But so I'm a teacher. I'm a science teacher, so I am a little bit biased. But one of the things that really it hurts me a little bit is the fact that I'm teaching high school mostly, and once you get to high school, a lot of students have already boxed themselves in. We're like, oh, I'm in a science classroom, but I'm not a science guy, and math is like scary or whatever. And it really does hurt me a little bit inside, because I know that like when I was in elementary school, when I did my when I'm subbing and stuff, when I was teaching a little bit in elementary schools, I noticed that all the students are curious. They all want to learn, and they all are interested, even if they don't know it, in science to some degree. One of the little party tricks I do as a sub is that I have this little taste strip things, PTC. I think Ariel will know what it is. But basically what it does is that some people can taste it and some people can't. And if the people who can, it's like super bitter. So, and there's a genetic component to it. And all the kids love it when I do a demo. In fact, I had kids that I've seen only one day, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago when they're in elementary school. And later on, I will come back and see them again in high school or middle school. They're like, hey, you're that sub with the little strip of papers that you gave to us. I'm like, how do you remember this? It's 4 years. It's like one thing I did. Right? So it's crazy things like that. That like, and that's really like, that really shows the fact that we are all curious and we all want to learn science to some degree. We all want to understand the world. And I'm wondering how much of it is because of bad experiences and like how we can use things like, manga and comics to really give the students some good experience and good exposure to science to have them be more interested in the topic later on. And one last thing is just as a reminder, back in the 1800s, all biologists basically had to be artists because there was no cameras. So if you discover a new wildlife or a new species of plant or insect, you have to draw that stuff. And I cannot be a biologist back then. I would have no chance because I can't draw. So like this division in science and arts is I don't think it's necessary. And there's a lot of crossover. Museums need artists to draw their beautiful illustrations. People who study dinosaurs and paleontologists need artists to draw the old life. And astronomers need artists to show what the systems really, like, the true beauty of the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think those are all good points. Deb or Ariel, if you want to volunteer to go next.
Well, I mean, I'm more on the art side, but I will say that, I do work in a field called graphics facilitation or graphic recording. And I do a lot of, one industry that finds our work very useful is I get called in to draw at meetings or at brainstorming sessions. And a lot of medical companies or science companies are very interested in this work, like, being able to help visualize what they're talking about or making their points much more memorable. So I think there's definitely an interest in this, and this should be this. I always kind of tell people that this is green field for artists. This is the field. If you have some scientific background or you have some knowledge, like I have a lot of background in technology. If you, as long as you can understand what's being said in the room or what they're trying to say, you can bring something to the table because you understand metaphor and visuals. And you can marry the two together to make something that is much more accessible and interesting to all sorts of people, because most people are visual learners or visual, take in information visually, like our eyes are a big part of like our brain's processing is like what we take in visually and how we understand the world and our relationship to the world. I mean, what's interesting about Cells at Work is that it, instead of like, I've seen anatomy type books where they go, oh, this is a stomach, you know, and they show like the stomach and it's my stomach, something shaped like a stomach has a smiley face, and this is a spleen, and here's something shaped like a spleen with a smiley face. Cells at Work goes down deeper, and it goes, this is what's happening in the system of your body. It's like a city, it's like a world, and that these things interact together. So it's not like these organs dancing around with each other. It's things going into the organs, coming out, and things going around. And you realize it's much more interdependent. So when you get to things like this chapter on cancer, for example, or in Cells at Work Black, the chapters on diabetes, you start seeing that you start understanding that your body is a system, and you have a direct role in keeping that system running. It will do its best to keep running, you know, despite whatever things you do to it, like eating badly or sitting too much, or, you know, drinking too much energy drinks, right? But there's at a certain point in like these books that you know, these stories can help. Like I had a cousin who died of diabetes complications, and I had another friend who died of cancer. So reading these stories helped me understand what happened, and help me as a person getting older and my body starting to fail on me in different ways, like what I can do to stay healthy.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think a lot of people, including myself when I was very younger, in fact, like the most terrifying thing is actually that anatomy body, you know, the full size body, and it shows partially skeleton, partially like muscle, and then all the different organs and things like that. And I just feel like that could potentially be intriguing to some people, but I, for one, am the person that will always cover that page whenever I flip through, you know, how to understand the human body, and that kind of creates that sort of conflict in me when I was younger. Thankfully, I've sort of, you know, found it intriguing enough in the end that I pursued it as a career. But art is a language, and it's a language that I think is quite accessible amongst people of all different sort of backgrounds and education and cultures and things like that. And I think utilizing that through comics is an excellent way in order to bridge our learning for anything from science to tech to understanding each other in terms of a social cultural point of view as well. You know, bring people together to laugh about something when it's, you know, it's like a comedy, or you know, telling important stories so that we learn how to connect to other people. I think it's a language that we can definitely build upon so that we can learn together. So I personally feel that I really appreciate Cells at Work and what it does for the community, and what sort of information that it tries to pique our younger readers and even readers, you know, within the science community. It's always fun to see our work portrayed in creative ways.
What a wonderful, wonderful point. And I love that you finished on that note, Ariel. So we are almost at time. So I do want to make sure I take the time to thank all three of you for coming today and for speaking with us and presenting such really, really interesting points that I think our audience will appreciate. And it will hopefully prompt them, if they haven't read Cells at Work, to go and read Cells at Work, which, as we've discussed today, has a really good, solid foundation, fairly accurate information on biology and health, and, you know, also a really, really good like sense of humanity to it. I think is something that we really got into, was the idea of humanizing these cells, humanizing your body, humanizing the story that they go through, and then attaching that back to ourselves and really feeling for it. To those of you who are interested, I just want to make sure you know that the Cells at Work world has many, many spin-offs. So after reading Cells at Work, if you want to know more, for example, Cells at Work Code Black shows your body. I don't want to really say thriving, but I guess we can go ahead and say thriving under less ideal conditions. And you can really feel for the cells trying to work their best when you maybe don't get enough sleep or when you eat a lot of junk food. And there's also series like Cells at Work Baby, which shows how cells work to help a baby grow and develop, and just tons and tons of different aspects. So we hope that this can be a good launching off point for a lot of people to get more interested in health, biology, and their own bodies, and that you'll go out and seek out these books. All right, so I think on that note, we are going to finish. Thank you everyone for tuning in to this panel, and we hope you enjoy the rest of TCAF.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Support public education.
Support public education.
Yeah, thank you again so much to all of our panelists, and thank you especially Mimi for all of your work organizing and moderating this panel. This was a phenomenal, I just had the most phenomenal hour, and I really enjoyed hearing from all of you, and I feel like I have just learned so much. Like, this has been really phenomenal. I've always been a fan of Cells at Work, but I'm so excited to see volume 6, which is, we have a little sneak peek for it during this panel, which is amazing, and thank you to Kodansha for giving us those images and for letting us have that sneak peek, and keep your eyes peeled for the English language version coming out June 22nd. TCAF would like to thank our programming sponsor, the Seneca College School of Creative Arts and Animation, and also give special thanks to the Beguiling Books and Art and Page and Panel, the TCAF store. TCAF also acknowledges government support from the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Toronto Arts Council. We have a lot more exciting TCAF programming coming over the next few days, so please be sure to check our schedule out and come and visit us for a lot more exciting comics, conversations, and events. Our virtual exhibition floor is also open through this coming Saturday, May 15th, so be sure to click on over and visit our hundreds of exhibitors and take a little browse through their wares. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and have a happy TCAF.